Welcome to Balls to Wall with six-time MMA championship corner, Craig Jones. I've cornered that many title fights. Next time you guys see me, I'm going to have that train conductor hat that all the MMA professional coaches wear. That's where I'm heading. But this product we filmed a little different. Usually I put all the techniques just in whatever order I see fit. But today we're going to try and do it as more of an introduction. So it'll be like 8, 9, 10 sort of loose lessons where we're going to try to introduce you to wall wrestling. So for this product, you're going to have to swallow a couple of bitter pills, and that is you're learning wrestling from an Australian and you're learning some MMA coaching from a jiu-jitsu guy. Usually those things don't go together too well, but if you've made it this far, you believe in me. And we're going to start with the basics of wall wrestling today, and we'll throw in some fancy bullshit at the end that I personally like to do on the MMA guys when we train against the wall. But this is Balls to Wall, and it's my first proper MMA instructional. Lesson 1, things are different against the wall. So I'm going to be bringing in Tony here. Believe it or not, Tony is actually Mexican, but his name's Tony and he looks Italian. So like he might be lying to us, hey. But things are different against the wall. First and foremost, I can't sprawl. If Tony shoots on me, if I try to sprawl, obviously my legs hit the wall. Obviously this is so obvious, but it just needs to be said. If he shoots in open space, obviously we can start sprawling our legs backwards, but there's a fucking wall behind me. So Tony can run me into the wall and he can complete the takedown, right? Another thing that's important about this is if Tony shoots from further out, he can shoot with bad posture. If he shoots with bad posture, bent forward, like come up, like stand here. Yeah. You can stay on your legs even. He can just run me in like this. You'll see a lot of MMA fighters shoot completely bent at the hips, right? It's actually a faster shot and a little less dangerous, because imagine he slips a punch here and he bends at the hips. That's going to be much faster than a complete level change where he keeps good posture. It's going to be much faster bending at the hips. And while we can do that against the wall, if he bends at the hips in open space when he shoots, that's an easy sprawl. If he bends at the hips and the wall's behind me, I try to sprawl, but he stuffs me straight into the cage. So first and foremost, I want you to know that you can take what's usually considered an ugly shot in MMA so long as the wall is behind your opponent, because of course, if you take a bad shot in open space, they're going to sprawl on you. If you take a bad shot against the wall, they cannot sprawl. And again, it's much easier for guys to slip a punch here and bend at the hips than it is for him to take a full level change here and take a shot like that. It's also less dangerous. He gets his head off the center line here. It's hard for me to punch him, obviously harder to throw a knee. If he level changes like a regular shot, much easier to knock him out. The ultimate goal when we get our opponent against the fence is to lock our hands around them in sort of the fashion of a double leg. So we call it a lock double. So if I have Tony here, my goal would be to completely lock my hands here. If he faces the camera here, we can lock our hands however way we see fit. But this is the ultimate goal because it's so easy for us to take him down. It's very difficult for Tony to prevent a takedown at this point. We can stand up, we can take him down, or we can really pull him off against the fence and take him down. But the ultimate goal is we're locking our hands. So if I take this shot with bad posture, run him against the cage, and I'm able to lock my hands, it's going to be very difficult for Tony to defend this takedown here. Again, our ultimate goal is to lock our hands on the double. So remember that throughout the entire series. That's the best position we can get to, is hands locked below the butt. If we cannot sprawl because there's a fucking wall behind us and our opponent's ultimate goal is to lock his hands on a double, then we need to have a solution to address that, right? So when Tony takes his shot here, if I keep my knees pointed towards Tony, look how easy it is for him to lock his hands. He can lock his hands, finish the double however he sees fit. So what I need to do is what's called a split squat. So if Tony's shooting here, I'm going to turn my knees and I'm going to turn them in line. So they're in line with the wall here. Now I can start to open my legs up wider, and you can see as Tony tries to lock his hands, we've created that distance around our knees that Tony finds it very difficult to lock those hands. So if we imagine there's a wall behind me, even if I split my legs wide but point my knees out, it's quite easy for him to tie it up. You can see it bows my knees inwards. However, if we hit this split squat, now Tony tries to lock his hands. Very difficult here. So as soon as he shoots and he hits me against the cage, I'm hitting this split squat here. Obviously, if I split squat and keep my legs close together, he's going to lock his hands. So I change my hip level and I can get as wide as possible here. Now Tony tries to lock his hands. Very, very difficult for him. So that's one of the positions. Another position we have, so we have the split squat. We also have the reverse. So sometimes we'll end up in this situation defending takedowns. Either way though, let's say you should go ahead this side, split squat. Either way, Tony tries to lock his hands. It's very, very difficult. And this side is actually a bit easier to run out of. It's not going to be as easy for me to run out of a regular split squat. But if I reverse that stance into the reverse split squat, again, Tony's trying to lock his hands here. Very difficult. It's a bit easier for us to start running out of this position. So again, we can't sprawl. We need to prevent the lock double. We're going to face our feet the same direction in line with the wall and hit a split squat. Another thing that's super obvious in retrospect, but at a glance, you might not notice until you've obviously really tried or thought about it, is just the wall is behind me. So if Tony has any like a body lock, it is very difficult for Tony to get behind me because obviously the wall is right there. Whereas in open space, he can shut me by a bit easier. He can circle. If Tony takes any form of shot, he can easily turn the corner and take my back grab. But that's not going to be as easy when he gets to the wall here because I'm going to really press my back hard against the wall. So even if he starts to circle here, even if he has a strong body lock, and he tries to get behind me, I'm using the wall, I'm using my pressure against the wall. So you see my feet are further out. The harder I need to press against the wall, obviously when my feet are close to the wall, Tony's pressing me into the wall, but if he's trying to take my back, he's probably trying to pull me back away from the wall. So I'm actually driving my feet into the wall here. Again, even if he shucks this arm by, the wall's going to be both our friend and his enemy here. Again, if we're out in open space, it's going to be much easier for him to turn the corner and shut me by. So those are things you're going to need to understand when you first start wrestling against the wall. If you've done regular wrestling in the past, this is going to be so different for you to try and understand. I would say MMA Jiu-Jitsu is simpler than regular Jiu-Jitsu because you have less options. I think the wall is kind of very similar to that in terms of regular wrestling. There's just far fewer options that people have offensively and defensively against the wall. So it's simpler, but you need to be better at these things. You need to be able to obviously understand how the wall can both be positive and negative for us in offense and defense. Wherever we are, the wall, if we're defending in these positions here, the wall's going to be our friend in preventing them take our back. So you saw that from body locks and standing position. But even when Tony puts me to the ground here, and he's got a body lock, and I've started to build for height here, as he circles to my back, the wall, it's really hard for Tony to penetrate this space here. If I'm not against the wall here, and I'm taking the position I'm doing, he can throw this hook in easily and start attacking my back. But the wall here, I'm protecting this space at all costs. And now when Tony's trying to take my back out of this position, the wall itself is what's protecting me. So the wall's my friend in staying safe in these positions. And even as we start to build height here, the wall is still my friend in these positions. It's hard for Tony to really attack me now in similar ways to as he would in open space because I have this platform here. The way my weight is distributed, totally different against the wall. Everything's pressing into the wall in these positions where we'd be looking to take whizzes. Or even if I turn forward and I place my head against the wall, we're always using this as a platform. But the major thing we're doing with the wall is preventing them taking our back and using it as a structure to help us stand and keep balance. When you're a jiu-jitsu guy and you haven't wrestled against the wall, you haven't ended up in grappling positions against the wall, you really have no idea how ineffective jiu-jitsu is in these positions. If you watch MMA fights, the only submissions that really occur near the wall are chokes from back. And that's usually the top guy taking the bottom guy's back guy. He's taken down, getting a submission. Occasionally you'll see a guillotine, but we remember all the times the guillotine works and we really forget all the times they don't work. Most of the time, guillotines don't work in open space, and they have an even lower success rate against the wall. If we're talking about playing guard against the wall, if I have Tony in any sort of position, the guard's built upon hip movement, so when he presses me into the wall and my neck's jammed up like this, it's very tough for me to move, especially if he starts to stand up and hip in here. I have really poor hip mobility here because my legs are jammed. Even if I look at a triangle, see he drops back on his knees, even if we catch on offensive position here, I need to be able to bring my head away from the wall to cut an angle here. So obviously if Tony wanted to defend that, he can stick my head into the other side. So let's switch triangles. So let's say for me to finish this triangle, I want to drag myself away from the wall. If Tony jams my head into this side, now we can't actually get the triangle finished because I can't cut the angle. That's most submissions in these positions here. They have a much lower success rate because again, he can jam us into the wall and control the directions we go. So jiu-jitsu guys, your submissions aren't going to work anywhere near as good from a bottom position if the wall is involved in any capacity, and you'll find MMA fighters grappling is significantly better against the wall. You might grapple MMA guys in open space, not be as impressed, but when we add in this wall, most of our tools are really neutralized. All right, guys, let's talk about how we try to get them after a double leg attempt or a takedown attempt in any way. We try to bring them back up above our hips. Because like I said, when guys lock a double, they hit that lock double, they're below our butt, they're able to get some good purchase here and put us to the mat. Pretty easy. It's not guaranteed, but if they lock their hands, again, you're in a lot of trouble. That's his goal the entire time. So when Tony takes this shot, he runs me into the cage. Again, like I said, we don't keep our knees pointed forward where the lock double is easy. We're going to turn both legs and we're going to start to get our legs nice and wide. Tony's driving into me here. He's pressing me against the cage here. Really, if his head was too postured up here, it's actually going to be much easier for me to drag him up. So he's really pressing me here and staying nice and low. His hips are nearing my sort of knee height here, right? So he's in this position. He's pressed me really good. It's going to be tough for me to get out if Tony maintains this positioning here. If I make one wrong move again, he locks that double up and he puts me down pretty easy, right? So we need to get him back up above our hips here to start really thinking about turning him, escaping, any of those sort of things. So what I'm going to do, because our hands are already out and you can see we're above his double leg here, I'm going to take a whizzer, really an overhook here. And I'm trying to hold on to this nice and tight. My other hand, let's switch sides so you can see. So we've got the overhook on this side. I'm really trying to grab something here, whether it's the elbow, we can even start digging underhooks, anything to start bringing both sides up. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that overhook. I get nice and low and I start to shrug him up. This is obviously going to concede upper body control though. That's the danger of this, right? He locks his hands here. It's going to be very fast and easy for me to lift him from outside the elbow, but obviously we're giving him an easy hands lock, body lock here, right? So we could dig an underhook too. You see, I need to get a little bit lower to start scooping this up. That's going to be better because when we come up, now he's trying to lock his hands. It's not going to be as easy. So again, we're in this position. We get nice and low. We need to get him back above our butt before we really start thinking about doing anything here. So we take our whizzer, our overhook, and I grab around his elbow here and I really pop and lift him back up. And obviously, sometimes he's going to lock his hands straight away. Other times, as we pop, we're going to be out of control this inside space. So if he doesn't lock his hands immediately when we pop it, I want you to try and get your thumb inside that bicep here and keep your elbow nice and tight. And then we can start to slide down to the wrist for defense here. So again, we start here because if I reach for the wrist straight away, he hides it and maybe locks his hands. If I start at the bicep and he tries to hide his wrist, it's much easier for me to find it. So again, when we hit that shrug, if he hops down again to a double, we shrug him up. Immediately, when I come inside here, slide down to the wrist, because if I reach for his hand straight away, he pulls it back, he might lock his hands here. So that's our basic defense. If I do it without Tony, I'm getting nice and low, shrugging him up, control inside, control down towards the wrist. Guys, so like I said, lock double's best case scenario for Tony here. And it favors him heavily. If he really locks his hands nice and tight, great chance he's going to be able to put us down. So hard for us to deal with. We can't address the grips. Obviously, they're behind us. And his grip's so tight. He's pressing us against the wall, locking our legs in nice and tight. What we can do, though, is when he has this lock double. So I've obviously made a big mistake here. He might even level change here now. He's locked the double up, drop this knee to the floor, and he's really driving me in nice and tight here. So it's hard for me to pull, it's hard for me to pull his elbows and his forearms above my butt. It's hard to do this anyway here, but imagine there's a wall here. So his arms are stuck between my butt and the wall. So you can see he's really got a nice lock here. I need to make some space in the only way I can, and that would actually be towards his chest. So I would bounce slightly back into the wall. I wouldn't just throw my hips in straight away. I get a bit of rebound, and I try to pop his chest away. So we make that bounce, and we can try to slip down into it here. Again, he's driving into me, right? That's what controls the space on his chest side. But if I can bounce against the wall, we can make some space inside here to potentially lower our hips and drag them up above. So very similar to the shrug we were doing, but obviously this is worst case scenario here. Lock double, he's driving into me. The reason we have to bounce is, again, to counteract his drive. At least I move back a little bit. Obviously we get that spring into the wall. So I spring, pop, and I start to shrug down. Now, obviously he's still gonna have his hands locked, so he's gonna press up into us with a body lock here. And now we need to start thinking about how we're going to defend this. But it's like a Hail Mary. So I'm stuck here. He's pressed against me. I hit him, pop my hips, throw him back, drop levels, and try to pull his elbows up. And hopefully that pop creates a bit of space between his chest and our legs. So obviously we're going to do this sort of as lesson plans rather than instructional, right? So we did the defensive option where we're shrugging up, but that's conceding upper body control. So I like to think sometimes the best way to understand defensive aspects, if we know what they're looking for here. Once you've done a little bit of wall wrestling and you feel that your training partner doesn't know how to hold you against the wall, you don't even really need to think about escaping or turning them on the wall. They just leave you space to do it. So first we start with, how do we keep someone against the wall, right? So I'm not going to be taking this style of shallow underhook here. I won't be taking this too often. What would be better is if we're coming around the hip here. And in terms of positioning here, I really want my knee inside of his thigh here. Because Tony's doing the split squat, he's facing both legs this way. When I peel my knee back a bit, it starts to press his hip against the wall. However, this isn't necessarily ideal yet. We want to win this head position here. So I'd want my head on this side. Obviously, in terms of MMA and striking, a lot of dudes will sit it underneath because then they can throw punches a bit easier. But in terms of pressing Tony against the wall, this is really, we're closing the door on him, even possibly being able to run in either direction. And Tony's trying to clear this position here. We really got it pressed nice and low. He's likely going to control this inside space here because at any moment, if we can lock our hands here behind their back, we're going to be really, really strong. So if I take this shot, I run Tony into the wall. He shrugs me up. Usually as he shrugs me and he pops the hip, he leaves space for me to transfer from here and around. But of course, if I haven't done much wall wrestling, I keep my head on this side and I don't press a knee, and look how easily he circles out, and we can't keep him against the wall here. So as soon as they shrug us up here, we take that hip and I place my knee inside. He's controlling this inside space here, and I look to bring my head to the other side. Now Tony's trying to clear. Very tough. It gives us a lot of time to start trying to control their hand here from this position, and even potentially going back to this body lock or even reshooting. But again, as they shrug us up, we want to stop them against the cage. And it's going to be a race, because the second Tony shrugs me up, if I don't close this distance straight away, he circles straight out of there. So when he shrugs me up, I want to control this inside positioning here. This knee inside is really good, because as I start to flare my left knee out, and it starts to put a little bit of pressure on his groin. It actually brings this leg closer to me here. Tony here, he's actually quite out of position here. If he's keeping his head far this way, I mean, that's going to be fine. If he brings his head back up towards me, and I want to close that distance, I can bring my head inside. And the whole time, I'm driving into him here. I don't want to be relaxed again, even if my knee's inside and relaxed. Look how easy he starts to move against the cage. So with everything I'm doing, I'm driving in to these positions here. If I want to start addressing this grip, I take it further than he can reach, and we start to pummel back inside. But again, that's how we're going to really lock them against the cage in this position. Guys, something that Max Holloway does really good is he uses like a high whizzer, and he frames against the head here. And this is really good because he's sort of deconstructing what he knows we need to do for offense, right? Offense, you want that good head position here. So if Tony can press his head to the wall on this side, or even press his head under my chin into the wall here, he keeps me pretty tight here. If I can keep his head away from me, even if everything else is good, he drives in, he keeps his knee good inside. Now he tries to hold me here. It's quite hard for him to keep me pressed against the cage here. So what basically Holloway does is he focuses on one aspect of control, a very important aspect of control in all forms of grappling, and that would be head position. So if he shrugs someone up, he uses his height very well here, and he keeps their head pressed far away. This grip is very hard for Tony to clear easily here. And you see, as he makes space, he gives us room, really, obviously, to circle out of these positions. But he's bringing everything up, and he's keeping this underhook high. So if Tony tried to drop down again to shoot, that whizzer is keeping everything nice and high. So I'm really shrugging up on that whizzer here and controlling where he can place his head. Because again, he wants to press his head into me here to make it hard for me to circle out. If his head was out here, obviously we've got lots of space. We could start clearing this position. But that's something Max Holloway does really good, is he keeps everything nice and high and frames against the face. Guys, we just demonstrated something Holloway does where he sort of forces an escape against the cage. But for the most part, if Tony's got me pressed in against the wall here, I'm looking for a way to start clearing this position here. I'm really hoping Tony starts rushing things or making errors. But me, I need to stay disciplined here. I need to keep this whizzer, this overhook nice and strong, so it's not very easy for Tony to drop back to a shot straight away. Exactly. So the overhook, once it's shrugged up, I'm keeping that nice and high. My other arm is staying nice and tight. My elbow is staying close to my hip here, and we're keeping our arm inside their arm, whether it's at the wrist or inside the elbow here. It's quite difficult for Tony to do anything from here. And if you think about it in the context of MMA, if Tony's pressing me against the cage and not getting anything going, the referee's going to start calling for action. And really the responsibility here is that Tony keeps looking offensive. Tony would have put me down in open space and just sit on top. The referee wants him to take some risks and go for some things there. You know, we can't just stay in these positions. So if Tony's positioning is pretty good, he's got this inside knee here, he's got good head position, he's driving me here, while I'm staying disciplined here and not allowing things like him reshooting, I'm keeping that whizzer nice and tight. and I'm keep protecting this inside space so he can't lock his hands around a body lock. Even an upper body tie here, yeah, because of course he needs to beat this arm to be able to secure the body lock, and he needs to be able to drop to reshoot. But if I have a nice lifting overhook here, so we look at it on the other side, if my overhook's weak, Tony can change levels easily and start bringing this arm back below my butt and start shooting. If the overhook's lifting nice and tight and he tries to change levels and shoot, we've got that good purchase on the armpit here. And of course, I'm keeping that tight. He's trying to get a body lock on me, upper body. We're controlling inside the elbow or at the wrist here. Now his options are quite limited. And generally speaking, he'll start taking some risk. Maybe he wants to clear this, so he pulls his weight back a bit and we start finding some space to circle out. We can circle out in either direction. But again, that's the nature of it, right? Tony's put me against the cage. He has to do something with it. So in terms of, obviously, we don't want to hang out here forever. We're going to talk about turning guys and taking some risks for ourselves. But again, generally speaking, our responsibility is to stay perfectly disciplined. If someone has my back in jiu-jitsu, goal number one is hand fighting, preventing him choking me. Goal number two is the escape. I think of it the same with wrestling against the cage here, is that I want to prevent the reshot and I want to prevent the body lock. I want to prevent two methods he has to lock his hands around my body. And as he starts to get frustrated and take some risks, he might present some space. As you can see now, he's left. He's allowed my to go from a split squat to the reverse because this knee is not inside. So we can start hitting these positions here, potentially clearing it. But again, he needs to keep everything perfect to keep me in position. I really need to stay defensively ahead of him here to prevent him locking his hands in any meaningful way. Now we're going to talk about turning them, right? So like we just talked about being defensively sound and finding space to get out. Now we're going to want to turn them from them having us against the cage to us having them against the cage. Again, if Tony locks a body lock in any way, there's really not a great chance I'm going to turn his back against the cage. I need to obviously start with defense. So I'm monitoring this other arm here, the non-overhook arm. He might commit to something here, and that allows me to change levels. So then if he changes levels and he starts getting around my leg, I want to start picking this arm up. So I get my hips behind it, I start shrugging it up. Now I can actually bring my feet forward because look, if Tony tries to shoot a double, it's going to be hard with my underhook here. I'm really shrugging him up at the elbow. If he clears that, I immediately split squat again and turn my knees the same direction. So every time he attempts an attack here, and I can get under that arm, I'm going to start shrugging up an underhook here, trying to get closer and closer, deeper and deeper. Tony keeps pressing me against the cage here. What I'm going to do to turn him, I'm going to turn him towards the underhook side. So I'm going to grab his back here, and we're going to be pulling him in this direction. But you can see his left leg here is really making that difficult for me. So I want to use this overhook side to place my arm and my finger basically inside his leg here. And we can press him back against the cage here. In this position, I'd remove that hand now, thumb post at the elbow, push that in, and probably reshoot straight away. Sometimes the best opportunities for us to get a takedown against the wall here is immediately after a reversal, where they're going to be momentarily vulnerable. So if I really want to be turning Tony here, if Tony's being inactive, I just need to beat him to the inside space here. Obviously, just like anytime we search for underhooks, he might counter me with his own underhook. So it's all going to be risk versus reward here. If I have a thumb post switch and he changes levels, and I get under the elbow here and I scoop it up, now Tony tries to repummel, it's going to be much tougher for him. So I get a little purchase on the elbow and then I throw my elbow inside here. Tony tries to shoot. At this position here, I could even turn him away from the underhook. We can turn him in either direction here, as long as we secure a tight underhook for ourselves. Again, if our underhook's weak and he pushes it out of the way and reshoots, now we're going to be in trouble here. So when I dig that underhook, I start at the elbow to get my elbow underneath. I don't want to go too low with my elbow here because he can keep weight on it. That's a very weak underhook. And if I started to turn, he'd have inside trip opportunities and whatnot. So I want to make sure when I lift him, I'm basically elbow to elbow here. Now when Tony tries to sag down on that side, very, very difficult. If there's no resistance here, turn the direction of the whizzer. If he's really pushing back into me, that's when I place my hand inside, my little finger inside, and pull at the underhook. I press him straight away. I keep that pressure. I'm pulling my hand back, pushing his elbow to his body, and I change levels with my head around his arm. That allows me to get good purchase on the hips and potentially drive back in for our lock double. But just so you can see exactly what I'm doing with the whizzer, if we were both here and he had an underhook and I had an underhook, when I place this arm inside, it really puts a lot of pressure on his underhook. He tries to drive with his underhook. Very, very weak. So anytime he has a good underhook and I sag this pressure here, look what it's doing to his underhook. It's putting a lot of pressure on his elbow and shoulder here. So again, when we're here, he's shooting in. We're scooping this underhook up. If he provides not enough resistance, we drive him back in and we reshoot. But basically, we're using our underhook. Obviously, we've got a whizzer, they force an underhook. We're scooping the far side to start turning him in either direction. All right, guys, let's talk about single legs. Obviously, this one's head inside against the wall here, right? So some of you'll notice is when I press Tony against the wall, he keeps his feet to the wall here. I have to hold weight on him to do this, obviously, because if I don't, he steps away. So he wants to keep his feet here. We're going to go into more details about why we want them as close to the cage as possible. It's going to obviously be to do with a lot of foot sweeps that we can do against the cage. But even in terms of single legs here, I want to get behind Tony's leg here. The single leg's going to be easy if Tony steps his left leg out more. Obviously, it's going to be easier for me to start thinking about dumps if I can pull him away from the cage. And for me to do that, I need to control this space here. So if we say we've come in for the double, I'm realizing no way am I going to lock my hands in this position. So instead, I commit to the single leg here, right? If I try to dump him here with his back against the wall, it's going to be super difficult. I actually need to step inside his knee here and drag him with that leg away from the cage. A little trick to get a nice dump here is I'm going to place my shoulder on top of his leg here so I can put a lot of weight down into his hip. So again, when I drag him away, I pummel my shoulder on top and we physically put him down with a dump. So we're using our shoulder here on top of this leg to get the dump. So the single leg is a good option because if I come in on a double and I'm forcing the double and he gets an underhook and lifts me up, he could turn me and start countering, right? If I shoot him for the double, realize it's not there, switch to the single. Now if he tries to shrug me up, my arms are at his groin. If my arms are separate, he can shrug me up easy. So the single leg is a nice option to stay pinning someone against the cage here. But you need to recognize that for the single leg to work, we need to get inside this space between his leg against the wall. And I use my knee to start pulling him away from the wall. The likelihood that I actually get a single leg dump him here, pretty slim. But it's a feeder into other great attacks that we're going to go into next. But just so you see again, if I try to dump head inside, very difficult. If I place my shoulder on top and touch that shoulder to the floor, it's going to be much easier for me to finish the single leg. But again, the single leg will work, but its percentage success rate in and of itself will be much lower, but we'll be able to use it to get the reactions we want, which I'll show next.